Thanks for joining us today on the Big Blue Podcast. I'm Lee Goodson, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Greg Stone, Southeast Campus Provost. Hello, Greg. How are you?
I'm well, Dr. Goodson. How are you?
Great. We're here at the McKeon Center for Creativity in downtown Tulsa. Our special guest today is Dr. Suzanne Reese, Associate Professor and Director of Physical Therapy, Assistant Clinical Education. How are you, Suzanne?
I'm good.
Good.
Thanks.
It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you are getting ready for a new adventure.
I am.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
It's kind of bittersweet.
Sure.
I mean, I feel I'm commending myself for being brave enough to imagine doing something else with my life, but I'm also packing some of the memorabilia and feeling a little clamped over some of that.
It's a process.
It is a process. And so
Remind us when you came to the college?
in January of '89.
Wow.
Yes.
That's significant. That's a run.
It is a run.
Yeah.
It is a run, and it's interesting. Not very many people know it, but I was not the first choice for that job.
Really?
I was the runner-up in the
search process?
In the search process, and the number one applicant, the hiring sort of fell through, and so I didn't get to join at the beginning of the semester because I felt compelled to give my current work 30 days notice. So I sort of came in
the
late,
middle.
late January. Yeah.
Well, now you had quite a career before that, before you came into education, right? You were at the Burn Center at Hillcrest, and then you also practiced in OP orthopedics.
So outpatient.
Outpatient orthopedics.
So right out of school, I graduated in '78, University of Missouri. Right out of school, I thought I was going to work with athletes, and I did that for a very short time and just hated it. I didn't feel like they were as appreciative of the work, and so I looked for a different type of client to serve, and I got into burn care, and that was a completely different situation, working with individuals who had suffered pretty serious burns. But in the meantime, I taught burns at the University of Missouri for the PT program there, and I was a clinical instructor there. And then we moved to Tulsa in '81, and I joined the Alexander Burn Center. I think it was called Tulsa Burn Center at the time. And they were thrilled to find somebody who liked to do burns, because there's not that many people that like that work.
Well, it's really hard.
It is really hard.
It's really hard because there's so much pain involved, and so
There
watching
is.
that pain is really difficult.
It is. And it is, and a lot of the injuries are very life-changing, disfiguring.
Right.
So
There's a lot of psychology involved.
there is. I don't know if I'm really good at that, but I was in there to help as best that I could.
So what brought you to teaching?
So when I was at Hillcrest in the early '80s, the PTA program opened, and it was a nighttime program only, and they didn't have labs, so the labs were done at Hillcrest, and they were desperate for adjunct. So I started teaching adjunct in the early '80s, and then when an opening occurred, I guess I taught later when they were going through their accreditation process, and faculty got some release time to write the self-study. I taught then too, so I'd sort of been dabbling in it, and then when that opportunity came to apply, that's how I got on board full time.
Well, and you just mentioned labs. I mean, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about your great project, which is the Nate Waters Physical Therapy Clinic. And I know the story of that because we certainly have talked about it enough over the years. But tell us about how that came about, and how did that vision that you had come to life? I know it's a long story, but give us
I'll give you the short
overview.
version. So we had, as happens a lot, we had a lot of family members from the community reach out and say, I have a loved one that has no more insurance or doesn't have insurance and is badly in need of therapy. And so we were getting a number of those people, and we were seeing them upstairs in our lab that we could only see them on Friday afternoons. But the learning seemed really powerful. We were really convinced that those who participated were just a cut above their classmates. So that starts getting the juices churning. How do we think about that? And just outside my office was a vacant building. And I just kept staring at it and recognizing that's where we needed to be, because it not only was it going to be on the ground floor and we didn't have to worry about disabled people and elevators that weren't always functioning, but it had a lot more space, and it was going to be able to be expand our mission beyond teaching physical therapist assistant students, but also providing a much needed service in the community for individuals who were underinsured or not insured at all. So I did a little bait and switch with Dr. McKeon. He thought we were going to talk about accreditation, and instead I said, I can absolutely guarantee you will be accredited, Dr. McKeon, but this is what I want to talk about, and sort of presented a kind of an initial proposal, and he loved the idea immediately. And so that sort of led to a sabbatical, and the process moved forward at a snail's pace. I think it was from 2008 to 2014, from the sabbatical to opening the doors. So it was a long process.
And you had some significant funders involved.
We did. And that was fun to be involved in that. Of course, I had never been
a fundraiser.
Never. But going and...
It's more fun than people... It sounds scary to so many, but it's...
I was nervous. I was nervous, but Lauren used to say, nobody has the emotional attachment more than you.
So you need to go.
You need to go.
Yeah.
You need to get people excited. And
you did.
Yeah, so it was good.
Well, I'm Lee Goodson, here with my co-host, Dr. Greg Stone, and you're listening to the Big Blue Podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Suzanne Reese, and we've been talking about her numerous contributions to our college and community. So the Nate Waters Clinic was honored recently in 2019, January of 2019. The assembly was in San Antonio at Alamo Colleges as a Bellwether finalist. So Bellwether Awards are given out every year in governance and finance, student success, and workforce development. And you and your team were a finalist in the workforce development area. So tell us what the recognition meant to you, and talk a little bit about how the faculty and students in the PTA program felt about that.
Initially we didn't really know how important that award was. I think I'm in education, but I don't always know the nuances of education, or if you were in literature you might know Pulitzer or something, but that initially didn't have a lot of impact for us. But the more work we did and the more we researched it, we certainly understood how important it was to our
You almost
community.
have to go to that event to understand how steep the competition is.
Absolutely. And then when you get there, you want to win.
Oh, you want to win so bad. You just want to win. I know. Last year, Dr. Kevin David and I presented in governance and finance. We were a finalist, and we didn't win, but we were told we did a great job. And probably the same experience happened to you, but you go and you watch some of those other presentations, you're like, A, how did we end up here?
Exactly.
And B, I want to win.
That's exactly right. And we still to this day do not know who nominated us, and we cajoled and bribed, and they said they keep it secret.
They can't they can't let you know. I know.
But it was exciting, and we did get a lot of people that were very kind and came up and said, we didn't really know what to do with you all because it was such a unique project, but they were very complimentary of the presentation and the work, and impressed that a community would donate money to a college project. I think that was maybe one of the biggest takeaways for us. They were impressed with that.
Suzanne, part of that presentation was a video, a couple of videos actually of patients who have been treated at the clinic, and one of them I've heard speak before at PTA Pinning, and that's Alan Taylor, who you've worked a lot with. Tell us his story and how his life really was changed and saved in some ways by the treatment he received at the clinic.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. Alan is an international missionary and has a local church, but does a lot of travel. He travels a lot to Brazil. And he was in 2015, he was preparing for a trip to Brazil, and he suffered a stroke. And they did not have insurance. And he was taken, I think, to OSU Medical Center, but because they stabilized him, got him a little bit of therapy, and he was discharged in a wheelchair. And so that really obviously impacted his ability to resume his life role as a preacher. So he sought us out and came to us in a wheelchair, and he just embraced not only getting better as a patient, but our focus for many of our patients is we want them to be community instructors. So Alan was so good at teaching the students how to help him. And he coached them, and he gave them the feedback they needed to make them better. And he's done such a good job in that role for us that he's also now working with occupational therapy assistant students at the clinic on Wednesday afternoons. But Alan is now walking with a cane and went back to Brazil. And one afternoon we set all the chairs up in the Nate Waters clinic so that he could practice the lateral moves necessary to get on an airplane. A large airplane, you might have to walk sideways, 5 seats or something.
Right.
So we practiced that because that was the thing he was the most nervous about, was being able to get in and out, negotiate the airline seats. And so he's back to resume, to do what he wants to do. And yet we still have a really great relationship with Alan.
Well, and I guess it was the year before last was when he spoke at the pinning ceremony. The C4C was full of people, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room.
I know.
I mean, just to see the impact that you all had on him and that he had on you all as faculty and the students was just really extraordinary to see.
And he's always so appreciative that people stabilized him, the medical team stabilized him, but he said the physical therapists were the first ones that gave him hope of being able to move again and resume his life. And so, yeah, you're right. I get kind of teary thinking about it. He's a great man.
Well, so what are you looking most forward to in your new adventure?
Well, I'm going to try to get bored.
Tell us about that. How's that going to go?
I don't think it's going to go well. I don't idle well at all. I mean, I'll sit for 10 minutes and I got to get up and find something to do. So a really long-term goal is the Ryder Cup is in Italy in like 3 years. And so I'm going to learn Italian.
Okay.
So that will be...
You've got that on your list.
I got that on my list.
On your to-do list.
That's on my to-do list. And I'm going to assume the role of grandmother a little bit more often because family live in Chicago. And I do a lot of accreditation consulting.
Sure. Yeah.
So I anticipate that there'll be
Keeping your
things.
finger in the pie. Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
I was at a lunch yesterday with some friends, and we're all early, mid 50s, late 50s, or whatever, and we were like, who's going to die in the chair? Who's just going to keep working until the very end? And I said, I've got too much I want to do, because they were like, I'd be bored. I was like, are you kidding? There's all these things, right? And so you've got a long list of things you want to do, so you're not going to get bored.
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And you plan on, you'll miss TCC?
I'll miss TCC.
But you'll still be around, is kind of what you've hinted to me.
I-
You're going to poke your head in the door
I do.
every now
I
and
live
then.
half a mile from the Metro campus.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
gonna
I
be
can't
hard.
help it, but
Yeah, you're
drive my car.
Right. Go on your morning walk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I hope to. I want to mentor, continue to mentor people, and they're going to replace my position. That person, I want to mentor them so they get off to a good start and have as good of time at TCC as I did. And so,
Well, you've certainly laid an incredible groundwork
thank
for the
you.
success of the clinic.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Well, and I want to say, too, that whenever I moved from faculty to provost, and of course, you had been faculty for a long time, and then by that point were Associate Dean of Allied Health, and how great you were just to sort of help get me acclimated about the work that you all do. And it was just great to get to work with you
Thank
for
you,
those few
Greg.
years. I really
I
appreciated
appreciate- I
that time we
appreciate
got to
that.
work together.
I appreciate that.
And speaking of time together, if you could go back and spend a little time with your 18-year-old college-going self and could give yourself some advice, what would that be?
Well, I did think about that. One, don't be nervous majoring in physical therapy, because that'll be a good decision that you will make, and you will thrive in that profession. And then the other one is a little bit glib, but don't play intramural soccer your senior year so you don't break your ankle right before graduation.
Did that contribute to choosing PTA?
Well, it's pretty, I don't know if you all noticed last week, but we had a student on
That is
crutches
hilarious.
at
Yeah.
graduation. That was me 40 some years
Oh, my
ago. I
gosh.
was on
Okay.
crutches at graduation. So, yeah, I'd like to replay that one.
Just count your blessings and move on instead of pushing the envelope. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, you've been listening to the Big Blue Podcast. We want to thank our guest, Dr. Suzanne Reese. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being here
Thank
today,
you.
for spending some time with us today, and we want to thank you for listening. Remember, you can catch the Big Blue Podcast each week in the week at TCC and on the Creativity channel at YouTube. And I think, Dr. Stone, we are now on iTunes. Is that correct?
We are thanks to the great work of John Niemeyer.
That's right.
Who's always in the room with us, who
Right.
we don't
He
often
never gets
mention.
recognized. He should be in the
It's
credits.
our studio
Yeah.
engineer. Now you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes.
There you go. We're moving up. All right.
That's
There we go.
great.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.